Green Breather Days are an idea that we're very enthusiastic about. We want to see whether they would work. And really the only way of doing that is to see, actually, on a few Saturdays in the year, how do they go down with people? Was it good? Was it bad? This isn't in any way a plan that we will be doing forever after. If it goes badly, we'll scrap it and do something else. So we think it's something that we're going to do. What we want to do is get all your views to mold that project into something that is popular with people. They like, the opportunity to be popular with people, I think, is the concept we want to get across. And if it doesn't work, as I say, we'll put it to bed and think about something else. We've got the agenda on the screen. Hopefully, people joining us on Zoom can see that. As I say, we will finish at 7:30. We're going to try and minimize the amount of people like me or Alex or Rachel who are talking at you, but we want to just make sure people are up to speed before we go into little groups, and that's where we understand and get your views together. And when we get to that point, we'll tell you how that's going to work. And then we'll feedback. We'll hear feedback from the breakout rooms. We'll have so long as we've got time, we'll have a kind of everyone get together to make sure that last thing that someone wants to say is heard and listened to. And afterwards, we'll make sure that we keep in contact with you about how this project is going, and keep the conversation going. So what we'll do to start with is I'll hand over to Alex, who will give a background on how we got to where we are. And then Rachel will take over. And then after that short period, we'll go into breakout rooms where the real meat of the meeting will take place. Okay, everyone? Over to Alex.
So I'm sure all of you here know, but just in case there's any doubt, I'll just first explain what we mean by Green Breather Days. So this is our proposal that one Saturday every month in the summer months, we will close the town centre to cars and have it a pedestrianised space, which we think is a fantastic way to encourage people to travel actively. But why did we get to this point where we were talking about this as an idea? Well, it kind of came from two main strands. And we started with the point that there have been years of problems with congestion in the town centre, in Marketplace, and it has become a difficult space for pedestrians. And various changes have been made that have made it better for pedestrians, but it hasn't been a full process that's been completed yet. And we want to see if there's some way that we can tip the balance a bit and make it into a better space for pedestrians. But the other strand is that as a council, we are aiming for Frome to be net zero emissions by 2030. And a simple fact is that to do that, we do need to think about how we travel around in a different way. And that involves reducing our car usage. So we want to see if we can make Frome a place where the air quality is better, so that we're not using cars as much, we're traveling more actively, and it's better for our lungs. We've done some measurements, and we think that about 12,000 vehicles are passing through the Marketplace every Saturday, potentially up to 12,000, which is a massive amount. And you can see on the screen, there's a graph here which shows the emissions, the CO2 equivalent per kilometre of each different vehicle. With a petrol car, that's 180 grams. That's massive when you think about 12,000 cars each day going through the centre. So we want to see if we can do that differently. And we were thinking, how can we make Frome a nicer space that's safer and puts pedestrians first? But also, it's not just about those kind of more negative aspects. We think it's a positive thing in its own right, because it's effectively creating a new public space right in the centre where most people go a lot of the time when they're going through Frome. Over the pandemic, we've seen across the country and the world, pedestrianised spaces in low traffic neighbourhoods skyrocket. Which has meant people have suddenly had a new space where they can spend time outside safely, not having to worry about cars, breathing in cleaner air and giving them space to dwell, not just somewhere you pass through just to get somewhere else. And low traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, they're quite different to what we're proposing here, but the ones that have taken place give us a kind of indication of what a pedestrianised space could do. And what they found is that they actually provided a boost for businesses. And you might think that would be very strange, especially in a pandemic when businesses have obviously struggled. But most people who are shopping do so on foot. And what they found is when people are encouraged to enter a space on foot, more people did. So those spaces had more people flowing through them, and the businesses did well out of it. And they also found that emissions in the area didn't increase overall over a period of time when it'd been open for a while, as people's behaviours adjusted to this new pedestrianised space. So when the community gets on board with something like this, we could really see a difference. But what we want to do in Frome is trial this, see if it works for the town centre. So we think this is an opportunity for Frome to think a little bit differently and provide a space for everyone, not just cars. I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to talk about the kind of conversations we've had so far.
Yes, so let me flip forward, yeah. So we have obviously had a certain amount of discussion. We've been inviting all sorts of comments via email, via our social media, and this is a précis really of where we're at the moment, where the conversation is, and these are some of the issues and some of the positives that have been coming at us. So as Alex had intimated, some people really feel that it's a great idea to give pedestrians priority in our town. We've definitely heard that that will just push pollution to other parts of Frome, which obviously we don't want to encourage. That's not the aim of this event at all. We've heard that businesses will lose out and won't be able to stock up. So obviously that's something we really need to hear from businesses and to find out what the problems are and to work with businesses to make sure that we're not adding additional layers of difficulty to an already difficult business climate at the moment. Some people have said that I can't wait to use the space as a community space. We've heard actually quite a lot from residents of Catherine Hill who are very worried about whether they're able to park out and drive and whether Catherine Hill will be affected. We have heard loud and clear that we really need to keep the buses running, which is obviously really important. Part of this whole Green Breather Day is to actually ensure that active travel and sustainable options are there for everybody. So that will be ingrained into whatever we try and bring forward. And we've heard it's really good to try something different to reduce our emissions. So broadly speaking, those are the camps and the problems that we've heard. We are going to shortly go into breakout rooms. We're going to break everybody up a bit. Sorry about that. I hope people don't feel too uncomfortable, but you all knew it was coming with the paper and the pens on the thing. We've got some questions that we're going to just ask you to discuss in your groups, and hopefully we're going to hear what the fears are, what the barriers are to make this workable, and also look at what we might like to do in the space as a Green Breather Day. So I hope that that's all quite clear to everybody. This is the bit where I whip round and give you a number. I hope this doesn't make everybody fearful.
Sorry, can I ask a couple of very quick questions?
Yeah, we will have space for questions.
Just before we break
Yeah.
out into groups.
Okay.
One is, how are you going to communicate the road closure?
Yep.
With sort of signage and things like that?
Yep.
And the other one is, how are you going to measure the success of the day?
Yeah. So the road closure, how we would communicate it as.
In terms of signage, so you're going to
Yeah.
have signage up near Sainsbury's?
Yeah, so
Centre is closed. Signage at the top of Bath Street to say that road is closed.
we would have to have, if we were going to do the Green Breather space, we have to have what's called a traffic management plan.
Yeah.
That will mean we'll have signage all around the bypass, really, to just communicate what is happening and where people need to go and how they need to get into town. But at the moment, we're not at that place because we're right at the beginning of the process. So we want these conversations to inform that. So that's why we're not here showing you a map, telling you this is what we're going to do, and why discussion is really at the forefront of the of where we are at the moment. I hope that's clear. Yeah. Yeah. So we're thinking of closing the road. I think it was in the letter where, so maybe a map might have been useful. Sorry about that. We are thinking of closing the road from Cork Street, from the junction. So Cork Street will still be accessible. Yeah, absolutely. To Justice Lane, so that the Cheese and Grain car park will also be accessible. So it's not about saying cars can't come into town, of course, it's just trying to stop the through traffic.
You just said that, however, previously on the previous slide, you just talked about Catherine Hill. So does that mean traffic is absolutely fine to go up Catherine Hill on those 5 meters?
No. So hang on one second. What I was saying was these are the things that we've heard so far. These are the anxieties that we've heard, and these are some of the feedback that's come back to us so far. So it's I guess we're suggesting that these might be things you might want to discuss in your groups. You might want to think about how you know.
And what we'll do, because we want to hear these concerns, and we're being purposely vague about answering these questions directly because we don't know these answers yet until we know what the questions are. And I think that's where that's the point of the evening tonight, is to really drill down and understand people's concerns, and similarly understands people's enthusiasms, and see if we can mold a scheme that will begin to sort of remove as many of the tensions as possible in the first instance, to give the scheme a chance to see whether we all like it in situ on the day, if you like. So make sure those, I've written down your questions, so we'll do that. What I think might be really good is, as we communicate with you after this, we'll begin to populate. Can we go back to the slide with the bubbles? So we'll begin to develop a list of questions and answers as we develop the project, to sort of try and we're not going to please all the people all the time. We know that there's a sector of the people in Frome that would love to close the whole of the marketplace, right up to the top of North Parade and right up to the corner house at the top of Bath Street. Now, that might evolve over time, but it's going to be a tension between that, and we're trying to find a sweet spot in between. But please make sure that these questions that we perhaps at the moment don't know the answer to, but if we know the questions, we'll be able to then begin to answer them. So is that okay, Anita?
Could I just ask, can you use the microphone? Whether or not Palmer Street and Stony Street will be affected by that closure?
Thanks, Shane. We're just thinking there's virtual people. I've just remembered. Thanks, Shane. We need to. Can you ask that again?
Anita Collier, councillor. I'm just wondering whether there's been any thought put into the closure of Palmer Street and therefore Stony Street to traffic as well, that might be affected by this scheme, or has that not been thought about yet?
At the moment, we want this to be opened up to discussion,
exactly.
you know, to the full extent. So if you you think that area should be closed as well, if you think the closure should be more extensive, then feel free to say that and we'll take that on board. But if you think the opposite, then say that too. We want to hear everyone's thoughts and use that to, you know, then move on to how we build this as a project next.
Okay.
All the streets around this town will be affected by this scheme. All the streets, wherever you live, because all that traffic's going to go somewhere else.
Yep, we're aware of
People will have the problems that you're trying to solve.
We're aware of that, and we're going to. That's one of the things that we want to test, because it's a reasonable assumption, but we want to see whether actually on the day that does happen. But it's a really fair point.
Maybe you want to put the signs out a bit further as well.
That's a good. That's good.
People traveling from around Frome that have no idea.
Yeah.
This is going on.
We'll log that. It's a really good suggestion, and we will ensure. So what we're going to do now, because what we're in danger of doing is not being able to have those closer conversations that I think we begin to answer that. So Rachel's going to give everyone a number, and then we'll do a mixing around just to mix everyone up, because we all want to sit next to the people that are our friends and we know. So we just want to shake that up a bit. And what we'll do, each person will do their best to feed back the gist of things, the particular highlights or lowlights of what was discussed. We'll go around those, and then at the end, if we've got time, we can just come back together and see if there's any really burning questions. I'd say if we've got time, because I want to make sure we all finish here at 7:30. So we'll start with Peter. Come in, Peter. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me as well.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to start really with the issue of enabling buses to access the town centre on these green breather days. And there was a plea to ensure that buses were able to do that, particularly because but the bus operators have been affected by the pandemic. They're operating at much below their normal capacity. And a specific plea was that if we do enable buses to travel through the marketplace on these green breather days, that we should ensure as much as possible that it's safe, not only for the bus drivers, but also for passengers who are getting on and off to do so. There's also a plea to ensure that we don't forget about the taxis. A lot of people use those to get in and out of the town centre. And so that's something else for us to consider. We then went on to talking about what might happen within the St Catherine's area. So Palmer Street, Catherine Hill and Stony Street. One of our contributors actually runs a shop at the bottom of Catherine Hill. And one of the things that they highlighted is that they do receive deliveries on a Saturday. One of the problems, or one of the challenges rather, is that they don't always know when those deliveries are going to turn up. And they say that that's the same for many independent retailers within the town centre. And so that's something that we will need to think about, to ensure that those independent retailers can continue to operate. Of course, if Palmer Street, Catherine Hill, Stony Street remain open to traffic, then that won't be an issue for that particular retailer. There was a view from one of our contributors that it might be a good idea to close off Palmer Street in order to enable some of the venues, the hospitality venues there, to put out tables and chairs. But the view in general was that we need to look at that very closely to ensure that it's something that can take place safely, and that emergency vehicles could get through. Just moving on really to the last question, which is about how people would like to use the car-free space. Clearly, the use of tables and chairs in Palmer Street is one of those if Palmer Street becomes closed. But generally, there was an interest in creating that kind of environment within the marketplace, recognising, of course, that it isn't the easiest place to do that, with the slopes, but nonetheless, an interest in exploring that one. And also from one of our local residents, that they would love to take the opportunity on these green breather days to find out about all the initiatives that are going on within the town, whether those relate to our environmental initiatives or arts related initiatives, in a way that it isn't possible, of course, when the marketplace is open and has traffic running through it. So I hope that covers some of the key points that were raised in my group. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, very much. Is there anyone else in Peter's group that is dying to say anything? Because if they are, I think we can patch you through. Or has Peter given a reasonable summary? Well, I'm sure he's given a reasonable summary, but is there anything in that group? Nothing, Sarah, is coming through? Okay. So what we'll do, we'll go to the other virtual room, and Viv Whitaker is going to feed back from that. Over to you, Viv.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So in our group, there were some similar issues to Peter's group, a bit of discussion around bus access, and how would buses be able to access into the town centre? Would marshals be needed? How could speed be controlled? Also, what about deliveries for businesses and residents? What is going to be the proposed time, and could that work for businesses? And then a few points raised about what about increased traffic in the other parts around town, the knock-on effect of this. In terms of kind of the barriers for how this might affect people, I think one of the key points that came out was really about how this was going to be communicated. But not just within the town, but actually to people coming in from outside the town. So the villages around Frome, but even wider as well, just to let people know that there won't be a through road, but also to promote it as well as an opportunity to come in and enjoy the town. So probably something there to really think about how we're going to communicate widely on the proposal. And then in terms of what we would like to do with the space, there were lots of great ideas about how it could be used as a really buzzy environment. Some strong interest in having markets, food stores, music that you could hear without traffic. A nice safe space for children to play. So kind of focus on play areas, children play areas, puppet shows. And just that there's a real enjoyment of just being a safe space that people could wander around without having to think about traffic, and really optimizing that, making the most of Bowles Cross with possibly having some presentations about the environment and sustainability issues to explain why we're doing this well, and trying to create a lively atmosphere in that particular spaces.
Thanks very much, Viv. Is there anyone else in your group that's dying to say anything? This won't be the last opportunity. Okay, that's grand. So if we go to table 1, over to you.
Just yeah, that's it. Can you hear me? Okay. So we actually thought very similar to before. Our table's quite an even mix of residents and business owners. So potential issues, again, traffic displacement, quite a big issue, obviously, with residents who are living in Rosters Road and places like that around. Shutting the town centre is not going to stop people coming to Frome for other reasons. So are they going to then not use the bypass and start travelling through more residential areas, not only from the kind of emission side of it, but also from the fact that the roads are narrow and they're small? Then from the kind of retail side of it, how far will this closure go? So would it then start to incorporate Catherine Hill, Palmer Street, things like that, which I know we're not talking about at the moment, but obviously that's a consideration for us in the long term. And the hours of access, that was the other thing, potential issue. How long are we talking about closing the roads for, because of access deliveries and bits and pieces like that. And will Catherine Hill become then a rat run if people are being able to access that? That's one obviously issue, because Saturdays, that's pretty mental anyway, isn't it? So trying to get out through there with a car as well. Then for the next bit, we were concerned about cost. Would that be an issue? Because obviously it'll all need to be marshalled, police signed. If it did work, Abby was mentioning why just the summer months, because actually it might be quite a nice thing, but then at the same time, if it's every Saturday, some of us can't function. Like you were mentioning, I think Vivian, you had somebody who has deliveries all day Saturday. So, you know, as I'm Bramble and Wild on Catherine Hill, like I physically, if it was every Saturday, couldn't run my business. So that makes quite a big difference to me if it does then stretch out into Catherine Hill because of weddings. And then, have I missed something on here? My notes are actually not that great. The use of space, we also like the idea of the kind of environmental thing, a green day, but the one thing that we were quite adamant about was that it would be an affordable scheme. We already have the independent market, and like one of our group was saying that it's actually not feasible for a lot of people in Frome. It's too expensive. Like a tenner for a wrap is too, is too much money. So to have something that's maybe free, or some free entertainment, or even cheaper food, or maybe market days that are slightly revolving around different themes, but not also pushing people who are in the residential retail part of Frome out as well, which some of us find with the markets. So having something that's a little bit different, but also allowing people to enjoy the ambience and the feel of the area, maybe with more, tables. And then we also said about bicycles. So we would like to push the bicycle use, e-bikes, maybe having a bike park, to encourage people to come from Frome and using a sustainable way of getting there in the first place rather than the cars. So maybe that's a way around it. But I probably missed something. So
Yeah, is anyone want to add anything?
Communities, soapbox, speakers corner, that sort of thing. But, yeah.
Oh, that takes me back, speaker's corner. Andy Jones.
Hi, I think the mic's on. Okay. Our 3 bullets, we started with a lot of discussion around traffic management and signage, which we understand, will obviously comply with the legal minimum, but there's an appetite to do a lot more than that, making sure that we're communicating with the surrounding villages properly, maybe establishing communication with the carriers like DHL and Hermes to make sure they know what's going on. And also maybe looking at how well the park and ride works for the independent market, and seeing if there's an opportunity to use that sort of way to encourage people to park out of the town centre and walk in or have a bus in. In terms of other things, we're keen that we do the best we can to measure the success of this venture. That's always a pet theme of mine. But we talked about doing air quality measures in town and outside of town. So are we negatively impacting some other areas? But also maybe working with some of the local traders to try and get footfall and trading metrics related both to normal Saturdays, if such things exist, and the breather day Saturdays, so that we've really got some data that says whether this is working and where it's not working. And then the third and final point we'll make was the need to sort of explain the benefits to Frome residents properly. So, great to be talking about air quality, but let's get some buskers out there. Let's get some live music out there. Let's get hopscotch outside Iceland for the kids, whatever, but let's make it an attractive place for the people who live here to come and visit.
Thanks, Andy. Anything else from your table that people want to add?
I just mentioned that we did have a lot of conversation with yet again.
Sorry, hang on a minute, but can you use the mics? Otherwise people online can't hear you.
I just want to make the point yet again that a lot of the conversation was about where all this traffic is going to go. It's not going to go through the town, so it's going to go and use other roads around the town and cause a problem there, all sorts of problems. And we talked about that for a long time.
It's a good point. Thank you. On the table to my far left, who is? About sort of
Hello.
3 inches away would be ideal for people online.
Inches away. Can you hear me now?
That's good.
We're a mix of retailers and businesses in Frome. We seem to have written quite a lot, actually.
Good.
Keen not to have it on the same weekend as the market, because it potentially would dilute the sales existing from that and just sort of drag it out over the weekend. And to fix a date so that people became aware whether it was, the second Saturday or the third Saturday every month. So they try and get their head round, some sort of consistency with that. To close further up at to close Cork Street, because that has, I don't know, I've only been in Frome 5 or 6 years, but It's a pedestrian accident black spot between the cross and going across to Catherine Hill. And if we're encouraging throngs of pedestrians to be in the market area, it's only human nature that they're going to want to go up into Stony Street and beyond. Fair enough if that car park needs to stay open for disabled, maybe taxis, but I can't see, it'd be a great idea to have it open. What's that? Traffic management needed to stop idling traffic in the town anyway. I think that was just sort of ongoing. Make sure that it's communicated, maybe the alternative transport available. The signage currently is not great, you know, because as a driver, when you come into the ring road in Frome, you see the yellow signs and you only have that moment to read town centre closed, not all the blurb underneath about the hours and the time, and you know there's buses and whatever else going on. There's a huge amount of people that are drawn on Longleat's money to come to Longleat and Centre Parks. They have no clue what is going on in Frome. All those 6 access points, I think it is, from the ring road have like 1970s signage and Frome, and you know, and carpet companies and other Cooper and Tanner and things advertising, which is great for them, but surely there should be like a big flower thing, and you know, the size of that on every entrance saying Frome, you know, the Southwest best independent town, and we've got a market and a pedestrianized, you know, whatever there is, 2 days where there's stuff going on, rather than town centre closed. The area in the market square still won't be flat, so long term, you know, maybe something needs to be looked at there. I know they've spent, I don't know, hundreds of thousands on the area outside Matt's shop, but still looks awful. You know, to make it less hazardous for, you know, visually impaired and young and old. I mean, I think kids trip off the pavement all the time as it is. What will be used in that space? What do we put? Elderly access will be affected. What would make it positive in terms of the impact assessment? I can tell you wrote this. I don't even know what that means. Make sure the car-free area is clearly marked. Maybe some sort of just basic A4 handouts that all the businesses in and around the area could have, that clearly sort of show the area that is pedestrianized and the dates it's available. That would work for the market as well. And that centre area, I think music, we put food, maybe involve local restaurants and businesses, entertainment, child friendly, seating, I don't know, sandpit, bowl we put, but potentially not 150 stall holders from outside of Frome, you know, and actually give local community groups and things a chance to show us what they do, local charities even, you know, there's a lot going on in Frome that happens and not, you know, no one seems to know about it. That was it. That's our thing.
That's brilliant. Any more on your table? That's great. Thanks ever so much. And finally,
bingo. House. Got all those. It's hard to think of anything that's different, but we started with a discussion about we represented with lots of businesses here and people who live in the centre, the effect of residents and owners on Catherine Hill, Palmer Street, Stony Street, King Street, and all the other places in the town centre. Already mentioned. What other ways are there to make it a bit more pedestrian friendly rather than closing the town centre? For example, are people using the bypass? There are a lot of people, for example, coming through from Nunney to Warminster and so on, using the town centre. So a lot of talk about where would the traffic go? Could we encourage other forms of transport? Lots of stuff again about, you know, some streets get extra traffic, parking issues, safety issues. How many days, how long we talked about, and rat runs, delivery issues. I don't think there's anything there's nothing new. I can't really say. I'm looking down it. But suggestions that how to measure success was interesting. You know, monitoring air quality, we need to be able to do that. And there was stuff about, you know, what can we do to put on to create extra traffic as a compensatory factor for the absence of cars and people. Yeah, traffic. So foot traffic. Yeah, okay. Having buskers, music events, eco-friendly things, better train service, perhaps. Yeah, I know he's mentioned that. That's it. We got one. But it was quite a full and frank and wide-ranging discussion. But I won't bore you with all because you've heard it all before. But...
and again, just make sure everything is down there on the paper. We've got a few things online, Rachel.
Yeah, we've got a few comments in the chat. So Claire Graham, I'm going to ask you to unmute and talk through your comments if you're happy to do that. And if not, I will read out your...
Claire, are you there?
Yep, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Crack on.
Just wanted to make the point really that this is an opportunity to promote with people that this is not just about taking traffic out of our town centre, it's about encouraging us all to think about how we actively use our vehicles. We've become dependent on our vehicles and people find it quite difficult to think of a world without a vehicle, but that's what we need to do. This is about more than just making our streets a little bit nicer once a month. It's about encouraging people to actively think about how they use their vehicles and make different choices when they're able to. Granted, not everybody will be able to, but how many of us hop in our vehicles just to do something small when actually it's not an essential trip? And this is where a lot of the negativity around projects like this come from. People feel that they're hard done by because they now have to travel an extra couple of miles to get across town. But actually the question is, do they really need to travel across town? Could they do something differently? Could they do it another day? So it's a bigger picture idea. And also I just suggested whether or not a last mile or last half mile sort of delivery consolidation could be considered for these days for businesses that need to receive deliveries. So we have companies locally that use e-cargo bikes. I can't think of the veg delivery service in Frome, but they have an e-cargo bike, and there's also some in Bath. That could be an option for these Saturdays, you know, for businesses that need to receive deliveries if they can't schedule them for other days or other times, whether a sort of freight consolidation on an e-cargo bike could be an option for these days.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire, very much. Hang on a minute, Rich. Any more online?
Yes, we've got a few more online. Do you want to come back?
Just a quick addition. I remembered we talked about having some kind of permit system, either for residents who live right in the centre of town, like Palmer Street, and they can't normally get in. So can they have some sort of permit system, and presumably similarly for deliveries, if it has to happen on that day, then some kind of system whereby certain people can be allowed through, because obviously you're going to have buses, presumably, and emergency transport. So a permit system might be something that might work.
Thanks, Rich. Rachel?
Claire, I don't know your other name, but I'm going to ask you to unmute now if you'd like to make your comments.
Hi, I was just in agreement with the other Claire that actually the problems that are being raised are an opportunity to seek solutions, and that it is generally by causing some inconvenience and discomfort that we find other ways of working. So it was just in support of and agreement with what Claire before was saying, actually. So nothing further to add. Other than I think it really prompts an opportunity to look forward to solutions and better ways of working in a sustainable way.
Thanks, Claire, very much. Rachel, have we got any more?
Yep.
Excellent.
John.
John, come in, John.
Hi, yeah. Sorry, there's two of us in the same room. I'll just move elsewhere. It was just to say, by creating areas that are less attractive to motorised traffic, by creating a town-wide 20 is plenty zone, the vast majority of town is residential. Having cars moving at 30, 40 miles an hour in close proximity to people on foot or on bicycles is always going to be a recipe for disaster. At the same token, it'll encourage people to use the bypass where the motorised traffic is separated from people, and further encourage people to use alternative means such as walking, bicycles, scooters within the limits of legislation, and just other cleaner, more people-friendly forms of transport.
John, thanks very much for that.
I would just like to add, I think we are 20 miles an hour in the town centre.
In the town centre. I think John's point was over the town as a whole, as I understand it. You never had any of that, did you? Sorry about that.
I would suggest in town as a whole, the 20 through the high street in town isn't really 20. People still come through there at 30. It's such a small section of the town's roads that is, lots of people don't even notice it, and even those that do, I see people ignoring it every day that I'm in there.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we've got the sort of the roaming speed indicator device in the town centre and elsewhere in the town. The reason it's not there all the time is because people get used to seeing it and therefore don't see it after a while. But one of the impacts of that already has been that the police speed enforcement team have been present in the town centre. Anita, where's Anita? When and how and what?
It's not been decided exactly when, and it will be at random. So
Would you be able to do that into the microphone just for the people online? Thank you.
Yeah, nothing has actually been set in stone yet, and it's likely to be on random days so that people don't become too used to when they're out and about. Certainly, we've got enough data at the moment for them to be contemplating starting in Bath Street. But as we get more data in from the speed indicator device, then those units will be moving around the town depending on where the traffic is the fastest.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks, John, for those points. Rachel, is any more online?
No, that's it online.
Okay, so let's come into the room again. Please, can we have the mics on, and we'll just go round for the next 9 minutes.
Okay, so I've got a business on Catherine Hill, and I personally handle put everything into my shop myself because my deliveries come in 2 seasons. So it's pallets of stock, and the majority of my deliveries are chopping boards, which are obviously very heavy. So that would have a massive impact on my business. Grace owns Bramble and Wild and has said in our chat that if this was to go ahead, and if it was successful and every Saturday came into play, that there's a high chance that she would then have to leave Frome. Grace herself is a massive draw to the town, although you are. So we have said, obviously, myself and Grace aren't really for this happening. However, we have said that the spaces along Palmer Street, instead of being for cars, they should all be loading bays apart from the one disabled, and that would then therefore help us get our stock closer to the stock. So if it was to go ahead and Stony Street was shut and Catherine Hill was shut, that you would then, for us retailers on Catherine Hill and Stony Street, for us to have access to Palmer Street and for that all to be like loading bays instead of car parking spaces, that might help us out. It would definitely help us out.
Yeah, I think if we're obviously talking about a safety issue as well for a lot of this, like an environmental thing and a safety issue, there are other things potentially that the town centre needs before a whole closure, like that road. I mean, there's always, I know Palmer Street bottle shop are always saying like they're seeing these like tiny little kids coming out the Montessori and nearly being mown down by people coming up Palmer Street. Like that maybe is more of a priority at the moment. And we were saying like Matt and Charles are always saying there's people, they can nearly see them being run down trying to cross from the bottom of Stony Street into the town centre. I think Polly was saying as well that that's going to be an issue. Like, is that something that could be done maybe on a more permanent basis, that we can
make it safer for people to shop anyway, because actually a lot of Frome's custom comes from outside. I actually live an hour away, and I know a hell of a lot of people who will come from Taunton just to shop in Frome because it's way better than anywhere else. So yes, it's great reducing car usage, but then you're also cutting off all those customers that, like, how else are they going to get? They're not going to bike from Taunton. So it's kind of like,
Okay,
it's really finding a happy medium, definitely.
it's a good point.
Written down.
That's great. That's great. So what we'll do, just to make it slightly democratic, we'll come onto this table here. Is any points that you ideally want to make before we close up?
That haven't already been made.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mine's more sort of carrying on from what I think John online said. It's not so much about the green breather days. It's the traffic in the town generally is a massive issue, because my shop's on the corner of Bath Street, and I would say easily 70% of people don't adhere to the 20-mile-an-hour limit. You know, the speed through town is horrific, and particularly with the lack of crossing points, you know, on that corner, people trying to cross the road, cars coming down. It's literally right outside my door. I see people getting bibbed at, shouted at on a daily basis, and obviously people do cross where they're not supposed to, but the crossings are, you know, the one up Bath Street is kind of pointless. It's too far away from anything. And people now don't tend to use the one as much on Cork Street because the barriers have gone, which I think aesthetically it looks much more attractive, but it's caused a problem of, you know, people just cross wherever now.
Yeah.
And cars don't slow down. I don't know if this new, what do you call it, highway code is going to make any difference, but generally the speeding through town, I think, is a bigger issue than what we're actually here for.
Hopefully it's not a case of either or. It's trying to begin to address both. Table in the far corner, anything you want to say? That's great.
I mean, would it be possible on the bus idea to reroute the buses so that if this scheme goes ahead, they would stop, I don't know what it's called, but you know, the bit that comes down North Parade where you turn into the Cheese and Grain, could the buses not all loop round that way and drop people there and forget about coming sort of through? You can't really shut it and still have buses, is what I'm, doing that same loop.
Brilliant. I mean, so undoubtedly people will have answers to all these questions, but I wanted to make sure that we at least collect all the questions and then try and answer them. This table to my left, anything to add?
Yes, hello, Paul. Just a bit of information, really, because I've only been in Frome about 6 months or so. Come from Cambridge. Cambridge has a really bad air quality problem, worse than Frome. And several streets in the centre of Cambridge are closed on Saturdays. I haven't got any data, but as far as I can tell by being there, it does encourage people to use those streets for shopping. People come in out of one shop, go in another, crisscrossing the street all the time. There's the pavement cafes and so on that people have mentioned. So it and the air quality has improved. The traffic is displaced, but there is because the closures came about at the same time as improvements in bus and cycling facilities. I don't think the displacement was as bad as some people predicted. So it seemed quite successful in the end. The only thing I would say is it does finish at 4 o'clock, and at 4 p.m. people of course are wandering all over the place. They still think the street is closed, and there's a safety issue then with the traffic re-entering the streets.
That is really, really important, isn't it? Do we get that down, Alex? Yes. We've got that one down. That's brilliant. Yes, Nita, can you use the mic, please?
We did have a bit of a conversation around the fact that it has been noticed in the past, particularly with the Sunday market, for instance, that when the traffic is closed, when the roads are closed to traffic, it doesn't have any major negative impact on businesses because the footfall is huge. What we're saying is if we close the roads to traffic and there aren't those markets there to attract people, what we need to be doing is encouraging more footfall to make sure that businesses don't suffer in that way. So anything we can do to promote things, to bring people into the town, it's really about the communication, I guess, but whatever we can think of to increase the footfall.
Okay, Shane, you've been patient with us.
Thank you. Yeah. The question sort of slightly focused on the possible problems of doing this. I'd just like to remind ourselves of the positive reasons of doing this. You know, we are in a climate emergency. Unless we make huge societal changes in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to be at 1.5 degrees in 2030. We're going to be 2 degrees around 2040, going to be 2.5 degrees after that, you know, and life as we know it on a global civilized scale will cease to be. So that for me is the reason for that I'm very, very interested in this. And I don't know if anybody remembers Reclaim the Street parties, that feeling of joy when music and people take over roads is, you know, it's memorable. It sticks with people for decades. So I really want to just accentuate the positiveness. It's fascinating hearing, you know, the things we need to look out for, but I want to accentuate the positives for this. This is the absolute minimum we should be doing.
I'm going to put the guillotine down now on that. It's nice to end on a positive feeling. Rachel, what are the next steps?
So our next steps, having heard all of this, we're going to take it all away, inwardly digest. We will collate it all together and send it back out to anybody who has registered. If you hadn't registered and you've just come and you want us to send you the information to make sure that we have in fact taken it all on board, if you write your email address on the paper, then we will pick that up. We do need to get travel management plan in place. I've said in the letter we're looking to do something between May and September is the proposed timeframes, and nothing that we've heard has particularly been around that this evening. So to that end, we will try and put a travel management plan together quite quickly, but obviously we will liaise with the through the Frome Times, and we'll continue to put letters through businesses' doors and continue to use the WhatsApp groups. So if there's any other way that you think it's useful for us to talk to you, then please just write that on the piece of paper too.
Good. And the other way is for you to, if you feel we're not getting to you, make sure you come to us, because this is, please, honestly, that's the way that we make sure we hear everything and we have the conversation with you. It's all about trying to do this thing as a community as opposed to having things imposed, which none of us want, I think.